Hi everyone, welcome to my first Skillshare class, and today we're going to be talking about how to apply psychology to the sport of football. As you can see, my name is Gabriel Jones, and I'll just start by telling you a little bit about who I am. You can see some lovely pictures of me here, and my background is in strength and conditioning and personal training. So I've got a master's degree in strength and conditioning. I've been coaching football and personal training for the last 12 years, and I've got some semi-professional playing experience. I'm a personal trainer and a performance coach, and I'm definitely not a doctor or psychologist. So please just bear that in mind going forwards. So what are we going to learn? Well, first of all, we're going to learn about football, the game itself. How does it work? What are the demands? I'm sure you are on this class because you have some basic interest in football and you maybe want to know a little bit more about it from a psychological perspective. In terms of game understanding, we're going to be thinking about how do we make the best decisions on the pitch. We're going to talk about flow state and how we unlock it and how we perform in the zone and how we can do that as often as possible when we play. Positive self-talk and how you're going to channel your inner dialogue and how you're going to use that to determine positive outcomes for yourself on the pitch. We're going to talk about doublethink, so learning how to think flexibly and how to hold contradictory beliefs, which we'll talk a lot more about as we go into it. And we're also going to look at choking, which is the phenomenon that can torture a lot of elite performers. And yeah, we're going to discuss how and if there is a way for you to try to avoid choking during performance yourself. Mental rehearsal, so we're going to talk about whether there's a possibility that mental repetition could possibly be more important than physical repetition. And finally, the mental toughness aspect of sport, creating that mindset to tolerate unfavourable and difficult conditions. So that's a very important aspect of elite sport, the higher up the levels you go. And we're going to talk about how important it really is. So let's get into it. So, football, what we know about the game, or what you may or may not know about the game. It's 11 versus 11 players. May sound obvious to some people, but others maybe not. So, you're playing with one goalkeeper plus 10 other players. And there's all sorts of formations that your team can look like, that your team can use when you play football. So, you've got a couple of examples of that here. We've got an example where there are 3 players at the back and there's 2 in midfield. There's 3 attacking midfielders and then there's 2 players playing up front. You can have another example of that where you've got a back 4 and then you've got 2 holding midfielders. You've got 3 attacking midfielders again, but this time you've only got 1 striker, so you've got 1 additional defensive player. Football is an invasion game, okay? So the objective is to score a goal, okay? It's to keep possession of the ball, get the ball into the other half, and score in the other goal. However, because there are 11 players that you need to get past before you can score a goal, it makes football a relatively low-scoring game. So most games are decided by 1 goal or 2 goals. Yes, there are some high-scoring games, but in general, it's quite a low-scoring game. And football consists of 4 very specific moments. So you can see what they are here. You've got the cycle of football. So moment 1 is attack. So that is when your team is in possession of the ball. And then in the first green circle to the right, you can see there is a transition moment. Transition into defence. So your team had the ball, but have just been dispossessed of the ball. And this transition moment lasts for about 5 to 6 seconds. You then have the next phase, which is defending. So your team is now out of possession. The transition moment has expired. You've been dispossessed for longer than 5 or 6 seconds, and your team is now in a defensive shape. And then your team will be defending for however long it takes them to win the ball back. But eventually they will win possession back, and that signifies the start of your transition into attack. So you can see the other green circle on the left hand side. Your transition to attack is also about 5 to 6 seconds. And once you have had the ball for longer than 5 or 6 seconds, you're now in a steady state of attack. So we know now that at any given stage in the game, you're going to be in one of these 4 moments. So during the game, players must be able to do a lot of things with high skill and ability. They need to do it at speed, there has to be quality, and one of these things is passing. So you have to be able to pass the ball to your teammate accurately, with an accuracy of, on average, 80% and above. And you need to be able to have a range of passes. You need to be able to pass short, long, over the top, using different parts of the foot, under pressure. And on top of this, you also need to be able to control the ball. You also need to be able to dribble and run with the ball and carry it into spaces. And you also need to be able to shoot with accuracy as often as possible. So there are multiple skills that we need to be strong at in football, and we have to be able to do these with accuracy, consistency, and under constant time, space, and psychological pressure, which is where the need for a class like this comes into it. So let's talk about game understanding, okay? Decision making, and how do we make good decisions when we're on the pitch? How do we become a flexible decision maker? And we might interpret this as an intuitive know-how of the correct actions to take when we're on the pitch, and a strategic understanding of knowing what to do, when and why during the game. We need to have a bit of an anticipation about what is about to happen as it unfolds. We need to be able to play with foresight. And there's a nice quote there from a coach who's brilliant, called Amy Price, and she says, your process is the most important thing, not the action or the intention. So for me, that means that it's all about having a repeatable process and knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. So when you have that process that you repeat consistently and it usually brings about the correct decision, that's when you have something reliable that can then make your performance consistent. So now let's talk about flow state, okay, being in the zone. So you may have heard about flow state before, or being in a state of flow. And if you don't know what it is, or if you haven't heard about it before, it's normally what is referred to as being in the zone, okay? Some people refer to it as runner's high, or some people just see it as being in total control of their performance, and they don't necessarily recognize it as flow state. But being in flow state is paradoxical. And why is that? Well, it's a series of self-contradictory moments that we find ourselves in. For example, when we're in flow state, time stands still, but it also, at the same time, it flies by. Some of our best performances, they just go by us in the blink of an eye. Everything in our brain is relaxed when we're in flow state, yet everything we do is with such speed and intensity. Also, we're taking on extreme challenges, but at the same time, it also feels effortless. So hopefully you're seeing these paradoxes in flow state. And it's just being in the optimal state of consciousness where we feel our best and we perform at our best. It's a little bit, I think of it like being in the Matrix when he's dodging the bullets and he sees these bullets moving in slow motion, and we feel like we can execute our actions clearly and precisely while we see all of this chaos going on around us. That's what being in flow state is. And sometimes when we're in flow state, we detach from our when we're in flow state, we detach from our prefrontal cortex, and that removes our awareness of our situation. So this is a result of immersing ourselves in our game, okay, in our work. And to do this, we need a lot of things. We need to have intrinsic rewards. We need to have a clear set of goals and a sense of progress. We also need to have immediate feedback so we can understand what our performance looks like. And also the challenge has to match our perceived skill set. So it can't be too easy or too hard. Really, when you're in flow state, you're just in that sweet spot where it's a performance that is difficult, but you know you can manage it. And we can achieve a really strong, focused flow state performance by being intensely focused on the present moment. And during flow state, we detach from our prefrontal cortex, and this makes us less aware of time. It makes us less aware of our self-critic, which is a really important aspect of all of this, and it makes us feel incredible and capable of anything. So as footballers or people in general, when we're doing whatever work it is that we're trying to perform to a high level, it's so important that we try and access that flow state. So, positive self-talk. Okay, what is self-talk? So this could be referred to as the conversations that we have with ourselves. It's our inner dialogue. It's the conversations that we have in our mind. And often these conversations we have with ourselves, they'll be positive or negative. And when we repeatedly listen to these conversations, they begin to form the basis of our beliefs. Okay, so what is an example of some negative self-talks? So an example might be for a footballer, my touch always lets me down. The manager doesn't rate me. I always miss big chances. My mistakes always lead to goals. Okay, these are lots of examples of ways that you might conversate with yourself during the game, or a way that you may speak to yourself, which becomes a belief. So the famous quote from Henry Ford, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. One of my favorites. So what does positive self-talk look like? So now we're reframing those last four phrases that we saw. The initial phrase was, my touch always lets me down. A positive thinking footballer needs to be saying things like, my first touch is going to be positive and confident every time. A negative self-talk like, the manager doesn't rate me. You could be saying something like, I'm going to positively influence my manager's opinion of me. I can change my manager's mind about me. A negative self-talk like, I always miss big chances. Well, if that's what you say to yourself, you're going to miss a lot more chances than if you're saying something to yourself along the lines of, I know I can turn big chances into goals. Watch me. I know I can do it. I just have to be positive, be in the right space, and then I can make good things happen. A negative self-talk like, my mistakes always lead to goals. Well, a positive thinker is going to be saying to themselves, mistakes happen. I have the power to recover from them. We know there's going to be mistakes, and it's just about how we spin these incidents in our head to make sure that we come out a more positive player, and that allows us to maintain our optimal performance levels. So, here you've got an activity for positive self-talk. You can do it if you want to, you don't have to do it. But I think it's really interesting to do these things for yourself so you can get a look into your own behaviours and try to understand why you behave the way that you do, either playing football or otherwise. So first activity is write down 5 examples of a time when you have used a negative self-talk. Okay, write down what happened. And then for each of those 5 examples, I want you to write down how you could rephrase those particular messages to yourself. How would you say them differently to yourself? And then finally, I want you to write down what you think the outcome would be when you start saying it differently? Okay, how is it going to change anything? How will it change your performance? How will it change the way you think and interact with people? Doublethink. Okay, now we're going to talk about the word doublethink. What is it? Okay, you can see it's down as it's looks like two words, but it's one word, and the reason it looks like that is because it's from a book. It's a phrase from a book, and it was coined in George Orwell's famous book 1984. So what is doublethink? What is a doublethink? So doublethink is the power of holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously and utilizing whichever one is going to help us at a given moment. So we can apply doublethink to sport, and one of my favorite books, which is called Bounce by Matthew Syed, has a great example of doublethink, and he relates it back to a golfer who has a really easy shot. And in this example, the ball is 10 feet away from the hole. So I guess in golf that is considered like a penalty kick. You're expected to sink it. It's possible to miss, but you've got quite a good chance of putting the ball away. So with that in mind, on one side of the brain, the golfer has a mindset of total confidence and belief. As we talked about before with positive self-talk, if you're going to be an elite performer, you have to have extreme confidence and extreme self-belief. So the golfer is drilling all of these positive messages into their brain. They've got that confidence, they've got that self-belief. However, at the same time, on the other side of the brain, the golfer holds an opposing thought. They have an acute understanding that he should not overhit the ball, because if he misses, the ball is going to be too far away for a tap-in on the next shot. So how is that possible? The golfer is holding two simultaneous thoughts that completely contradict each other. He's saying, I'm definitely 100%, absolutely, no doubt in my mind, going to sink this shot. But then there's this other little thought, which is, I need to slightly underhit this shot, because if, which is not going to happen, I do miss, I need to be able to putt from an even closer distance. And it sounds weird, it sounds a little bit crazy, but all the best athletes are able to do this, and they have to be able to do this. It's a tool for your performance, and it's going to protect you against complacency. It's going to help you to think flexibly. So doublethink is, I think, one of the most interesting aspects of psychology in sport. And yeah, it's such a good habit. It's a skill that you have to learn how to do, in my opinion. And yeah, practice it yourselves. See what you think. So let's move on to choking. Okay, another strange phenomenon in football and many other sports, in any aspect of life. It's always possible to fluff our lines. It's possible to end up in the headlights and forget completely what it is we're supposed to be doing, and not know where to go from there. So what is choking? Many players experience the phenomenon of choking at some stage in their career, and whether that's amateur or professional, but when we're desperate to pull off the best performance we can possibly muster, we can spiral into a tragic series of actions on the pitch where, no matter what our level of expertise is, we simply cannot seem to do anything right. But what is it? What is choking, and how does it happen? So during high pressure performances, it's possible for our attention to change. Okay, attention is the key word with choking. Sometimes it's not good to have more attention. Okay, as we have learned from flow state, some of our best work can take place when we are on autopilot. We learn all of these things and then we just during the game. We just do what we feel is right at the time. So what choking is a state of hyper-awareness, and it's a battle between our conscious and our subconscious. So in most instances, it's just our brain focusing on the wrong thing. So we spend all of these years, think about the thousands of hours that you spend applying yourself to whatever your expertise is. Okay, so in our scenario here, it's football. You may have been playing football since the age of 4 years old or 5 years old. And you learn all these little skills and all these little movements, and stick 20 years onto that, you're not going to be thinking about these skills while you execute them at your grand old age as an adult. So when we suddenly try to focus our brain onto these things and get extra deliberate and extra specific with what we're doing with our movements because we're so desperate to win, this is where choking can occur. So think about the most complex skill that you know, and then try to explain exactly how you are able to do it step by step. Okay, every degree of turn, every positioning of your foot, every positioning of your knees, hips, shoulders, where you push your center of mass, all these little things that make a skill what it is. Consider all of those steps and how difficult it would be to run through them all correctly, one by one, in a split second, under pressure. That's what choking is. We're just trying to execute our skills when really we should just be not thinking about it. So how can we avoid it? So the first thing with avoiding choking is having a repeatable game process. And we talked about that with game understanding, having that thought process for all of the decisions that you make, and trying to stick to that as religiously as you can. So treating all games with the same focus. Yes, we may have a big, important match that we really, really are desperate to play our best in and desperate to win, but it's still a game of football. It's the same game with the same demands, and we have to approach it like that. So in other words, we need to avoid ranking importance on games. Every game requires the same things of us. We have to understand what triggers us. It may be playing under the floodlights, playing under the big lights, just gives you that extra anxiety, that extra desire to perform. Maybe it's the fans. If there are more fans at a game, that's going to affect us more. Maybe it is having a bad day at work before you go and play the match. That might trigger a poor performance from you. So we have to build our mental skills toolbox. Okay, and what do we mean by that? I want you to think about what a mental skills toolbox is. Okay, what does yours look like? What is in your skills toolbox? Okay, so just an open question there for you. I'm not gonna add any influence to it, but please get in touch and tell me what you think about that mental skills toolbox and how you can build it, how you can develop it. So we're going to move on to mental rehearsal. See there a picture of a young me playing football at university, and in mental rehearsal we are looking at our script. Okay, our script as a performer, our script as a player. This is a crucial aspect of performance, and it can sometimes define how well we're going to perform on a given day. And we're all different in the way we think, so we need to build our own picture of what the perfect performance is, what our ideal performance is, and that's going to help us repeat it on match day. So imagine being in your position and you receive a pass from a player in every other position. So I'm going to rehearse what, as a left winger, so let's say I play on the left wing, what it would look like to me when my left back passes the ball to me. They're on the same side of the pitch as me, and I imagine that they're passing the ball down the line towards me. What kind of pressure might I be facing? Is there a defender behind me? Where are my passing opportunities going to be? I could potentially pass it straight back to my left back. I could potentially pass the ball inside the field to a central midfielder. I could potentially try to turn and roll the player who comes from behind to apply pressure to me. So I'm trying to imagine these scenarios and what I would do in each of these scenarios. So once I've imagined what that pass from my left back looks like, I then imagine what a pass from my central midfielder looks like, and all the scenarios that can come from that. So imagine that you're in that high pressure situation. Imagine you're backed into the tight corners. How do you escape them? You're trying to imagine all the different scenarios that could arise during your game. It's not just thinking about what your perfect performance is. You're also considering where things can go wrong as well, and how you're going to deal with that situation when things go wrong. So that's just an introduction to mental rehearsal there. And there are some really interesting studies that have been done on just how effective mental rehearsal can be. You can see a study here by Oxendine, and this is from 2013. And in this study, they used 200 high school boys, and basically they gave them different aspects of practice for a week, and they gave some of them just physical practice. So, for example, like a free throw in basketball, and they were just doing physical practice for the whole week. Some of the groups were doing mental practice as well as physical practice, so they were just told to imagine the skill of scoring the free throw. So they imagine it, and they spent the same time imagining it, doing this mental rehearsal as the group who were doing physical practice. And what they found was that up to 50% of the practice time in mental practice can be as effective as 100% of the practice time in physical practice. So they actually found that as long as you're doing some physical practice, you're actually better off going away and applying the mental side of your game, that mental rehearsal, and you can actually be far more effective. There's a study here which was on mindfulness meditation. Okay, so this was for a group of college female soccer players, and they basically just got really into meditation. They studied the effects of what this mindfulness practice did for them. It made them far more self-aware, and it allowed them to be more effective on the pitch. And then you can also see here that watching a previous victory, it really increased the testosterone amongst some elite hockey players. So you can use the psychological images that we get from watching ourselves being successful and imagining ourselves being successful. We can use that to drive performance. We can use that to create the right conditions for success on the pitch. So we're going to talk about mental toughness now. Mental toughness is a crucial psychological trait in football. Okay, it's doesn't just apply to football; it applies to all sports, and it's something that is unavoidable. If you have any aspirations to play at an extremely high level, it has to be top of the list. So it's just about withstanding the pressures of high level competition. And what I would direct you to is there's a video from the late great Kobe Bryant, who he defines his idea of what mental toughness is, and it's inspirational really. So I'd recommend you look that up on YouTube. Kobe Bryant talking about mental toughness, and it's how we deal with discomfort. You know, we are put in all kinds of difficult situations in the game, and in football we see it as the world's best possession teams. They have to show extreme bravery to play out from really tight spaces. They're under high pressure from opponents, and they're not allowed to lose their composure. They have to be able to deal with the highest stress. So another way we can look at mental toughness is something called the grit scale. So the grit scale is a matrix which identifies how effective a player is going to be based on their ability to tolerate these difficulties during sport. So we can see low potential, low grit, that red box in the bottom right. That suggests that the player has a fairly low ability, and that's going to mean that their potential is low. But also, if they don't have the determination to maximize their limited potential, they have low grit, and that means that their likelihood of succeeding in that sport is fairly low. We then have the orange box, so high potential, low grit. And this is referring to a player who is talented. They actually have high potential, but they have low ability and success because they don't have the determination to fulfill that potential. They have low grit. They get knocked down too easily. They get beaten too easily. So the talent is rendered meaningless. And then you have the yellow box top right, which is low potential, high grit. So this is somebody who may not necessarily be as talented as the person in the orange box, but they achieve a good level of ability and success because they've got the determination to maximize their limited potential. So they weren't necessarily gifted with all the talent that our player in the orange box has, but they're able to make a better career for themselves in the game because they've got that grit factor. And then the green box, high potential and high grit, this is normally tends to be the most successful players because yes, they've got the talent, they've got the potential, but they also have the grit and the determination to determine their own success. And this is really where the majority of success on the football pitch is decided, is the players who want it the most, the players who are the most determined, the players who go that extra yard. So that can never be underestimated, and the grit scale is a really good way of identifying where a given player might land on the psychological side of their game. So next we're going to talk about the need to achieve and the need to avoid failure. You can see there I've called it Natch versus NAF. It's a really simple concept. They teach this in GCSE PE. It's quite a nice way for young people to introduce themselves to the psychological side of sport, and it's very interesting. And having an understanding of this concept is going to help you understand the type of person that you are and what kind of behaviour that might translate to on the football pitch. So I know that when I was young, I was a NAF. I had a need to avoid failure. What I've grown into is a Natch. I now have a need to achieve, and I'm not too worried about failure anymore. So let's go deeper into these, and we'll talk about what exactly they are. So Natch, the need to achieve. This is somebody who thrives on challenges, and they want to be tested. That's the most important thing, is they enjoy challenge, they want to be tested, and they approach challenges without fear of failure. They don't care what people are going to think, they just want to have a go at it. So these kind of people are likely to be more persistent, and they're going to consider failures as a necessary part of eventual success. And that's a crucial quality and aspect of your personality that you need to have when you're playing football if you want to be successful. It means that you're going to be better able to display optimism and confidence when you perform a task, and it means that you're going to perform well under pressure. So this is the type of player who, when it comes to a penalty shootout, they're going to stick their hand up. They want to take one. And when I was young, I sometimes didn't stick my hand up because I thought about what would people think if I miss the penalty. Whereas nowadays, I would stick my hand up for the penalty. It doesn't mean that I score the penalty every time. For example, a couple of seasons ago, I missed a penalty in a cup final. And it is what it is. It hasn't deterred me from continuing to put my hand up for a penalty because, thankfully, I'm able to think more positively in that sense now. So the need to avoid failure, this is when you're daunted by the thought or the consequences of failure and what might happen, what people will think. Like I talked about before with me, how people will perceive it. But it means that you're likely to give up on tasks a little bit more easily, or you might claim that you weren't even trying. That old one. I'm sure you know somebody who's like that. Oh, no, I didn't even want to win. I wasn't even trying. And that's a deflection tactic to try to avoid embarrassment with failure. And these kind of people don't like feedback. They're either going to ignore it or reject it. And they perform worse in evaluation or pressure situations. And also avoiding personal responsibility. So that's another huge one for need to avoid failure is denying the idea that it could be you accountable and responsible for the downfall of your team or anything in that scenario. So to finish, which of these two mindset categories do you believe you fall into? Okay, I want you to be honest. You're only just conferring with yourself here, so don't worry about that. List some examples which lead you to believe this about yourself. And then list as many ideas as you can for maintaining or shifting your mindset as far as possible towards a need to achieve personality. How are you going to achieve that? Okay. So that's all for this presentation. And I just want to thank you so much for getting to this point, getting to the end of the presentation and sticking with it. I really hope you enjoyed the class. This is my first ever class that I've delivered on Skillshare, so this is going to be an ongoing process for me. I'm hoping that over time I can deliver better, increasingly high quality content for you. I'm going to be really happy to present on aspects of sport and performance that you're interested in, so please feel free to get in touch with me and make requests, make observations, and have a great week, and hopefully speak to you soon.